Epigenetics, genetic determinism, and why the power is in your hands. What is epigenetics? This is science that translates to control above the genes. The conventional paradigm indicates that genes are destiny, but this is outdated and inaccurate. You may have a genetic predisposition for something, meaning you have a higher risk for a disease, but you have influence over how that may be expressed. Genes are like a blueprint. Genes can't do anything of themselves, but the environmental triggers have to be activated. The genes themselves don't change, but whether they express health or disease can change, and less than 1% of all disease is actually caused by genes. Even with those, you're not doomed. There's something you can do. We should think that the brain of the cell is the nucleus, but actually contains the genes. We know that the cell membrane, which is part of the signals of gene expression, their environmental input is actually the brain. When we talk about genetic determinism, that is the belief that DNA is our destiny. A belief is not a fact. When experimenters tested genes, they used to throw away certain regulatory proteins and study the DNA. As I stated, the DNA is just the blueprint. The regulatory proteins pick up environmental signals and change how genes are expressed. What genetic determinism is essentially victimization. You have no control and you're at mercy of your own genes. With epigenetics, the power is in your hands because your genes are expressed through factors that you do have control over. Because that's what a lot of people do. They just think that their health is in their genes and there's nothing they can really do. And that is just not a healthy mindset. So what are some epigenetic controllers and how do they actually affect our genetic expression? Number one is the mind. Your mind is by far the most powerful epigenetic controller. The reason for this is because it influences every decision that you make when it comes to our health. Also, every thought that you think becomes chemistry. Thoughts create physical structure in the brain. There are fields of science known as psychoneuroimmunology and psychoneuroendocrinology. Now, this translates to how our thoughts affect our immune system and our endocrine system. For example, you start beating yourself up over something, for being late to a meeting. You're immediately going to produce stress hormones such as cortisol that actually put you in a stress state. This demonstrates how your thoughts influence hormones and neurotransmitters. Also, there's a science called placebo effect. This is used to study clinical trials as the control. Patients are given nothing, but they believe they're actually receiving treatments. When the patient believes they're receiving a treatment, they get better an average of 33% of the time. This is a power of our minds. Something less known is a nocebo effect, which is the positive of the placebo. So this means that if you're giving a negative injunction, whether it's 6 months to live or an incurable disease, immediate fear arises in our bodies and responds accordingly. The thing is that when you believe this will happen, this will largely influence the outcome. There are many examples of people walking into a hospital, they seem fine, and maybe there's something off, right? But then they give them this cancer diagnosis, and all of a sudden they're paralyzed. They can't even leave the hospital. Everything is terrible, right? And just this immediate fear thing. And when you talk about the placebo effect, it's not just medications. Like, people are given fake surgeries and they get better. This is well studied, right? They're watching like a knee surgery, thinking that it's their own, right? But they're actually watching somebody else's surgery, and because they believe it's their own, and like they did the procedure to get well, and they get better. But they just made an incision. They didn't do any type of repair. This is real. The thing is that what you believe will happen will largely influence the outcome. You have the power to be well, but that power starts in our mind. Our actions are largely done as a habit through the unconscious mind. Our responses, behaviors, and aims are often unconscious until we become aware and take control. We don't see the world as it is, we see the world through our own perception. Number two is nutrigenomics. Now, nutrigenomics is the science of how every molecule of food you eat impacts your genetic expression. Keep in mind that food is not just food, it's information. The food that you eat is going to determine what copies of genes are being printed out by your cells. So you can influence your cells through Twinkies, or you can eat it through grass-fed steak, right? It's going to be a huge difference in terms of the outcome. Number three is relationships. Now, who we spend time with is who we become. Our brains have been studied to sync up with each other during conversation. Our relationships are also influence the decisions that we make with what we eat and how we move. They're more likely to make decisions around healthy people. Like, if you're hanging out with me, and you're unhealthy, the chances of you hitting up McDonald's with me is zero, right? So we can be the model for others as well. There's another thing in our brain called mirror neurons. Now, these basically mimic what we see, and it kind of takes that on as something that we do. Like, this is why we have to be careful of what we watch, what we listen to, because our brain, these types of neurons mimic us doing that thing, even if we're not doing it. All right, this is why we get emotional during certain events and things like that. We get emotionally invested in things that don't really have to do with us. But we can take this on to our advantage. Immerse yourself in your goals. Immerse yourself in what you want. Keep your heart on your goal. When you do this consistently, you're going to bring about better questions, you're going to get better answers, and you're going to take more clear action. The more clear action we take on a consistent basis, the more likely we're going to make our dreams a reality. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the show. For more, you can head over to anthonygastella.com for articles, coaching, and other free resources. Also, if you can, leave a review for the show, let people know what you think, and I would appreciate that so much. Support the mission of freedom. Thanks for being on this mission with me, and I promise to give you more powerful, empowering, great content to help transform your life. Thanks for tuning in.